welcome to episode 7 of Built FM. I used to say the podcast where people build software stuff, but it's more now just a general software industry podcast, I think, which is the direction I'm going in. And for episode 7, I'm terrified because of you both. So we have one T Matt, which I regularly remind myself that's how I say your name or write your name, because I've been in trouble for that before, and Bill Kennedy. So between the two of you and me, this is like weird.
But David, don't be upset because I signed a book for Matt and used the double T, which he then, I forgot even what happened after that, but it's Matt, so it was fun.
It wasn't good.
Did you become part of? Yeah, you become part of like the comedy show for that, like a gag on stage or something. So I've got this friend called Bill. What a jerk! I'm only joking.
I do get Bill when I'm hosting. If he's there, there will be a joke aimed at Bill at some point. It just happens, doesn't it, Bill?
Yeah.
Seems to happen.
This is awesome. Thank you again for coming on this. And the topic, hopefully for today, amongst other things, is developer education. So both of you were spearfished, and you both said yes, which was excellent. I don't really have a massive plan. There's no plan. It's more of a ramble, so we can just talk about how things got started, and both of you have got different perspectives, I'm sure. You might be aware as well, I work for Synadia now, so I'm looking after some of the public-facing stuff with the NATS.io project, as well as my own interests in dev ed as well, so there's going to be hints of that. But I think from a developer education point of view, I think there's these two aspects. Bill, you're probably, I guess, the most prominent and well-known educator in the Go space. The course I went on, I think I met you something like 8 years ago, or whatever it was now, it left a mark, and it left a real mark. So doing what you do and driving developer education, it was just a kind of like a lightning moment. And then Matt, obviously your time at Grafana, your background with GoTime as well, you've got different insights and I guess more of that around product as well. So hopefully we can kind of come from both ends and sandwich it in the middle, if that kind of makes sense, if that's all right.
Sounds great.
Yeah.
Cool. So can we start wide? Bill, how did you get started with education first and foremost? What drove you to that?
I've been doing this for a really long time. Back in the 90s, actually, I needed a second job. I had 3 kids, wasn't making a lot of money, and somebody offered an opportunity at a vocational school to teach C and C++ in the evenings. And I said, hey, I can do that. And I spent about a year doing that. I was going to work at 9 in the morning and getting home at 11 at night, teaching adults programming. So I guess that's maybe kind of where it started, needing that second job.
Kind of like now where we are, I guess. Yeah, I keep thinking about going off to do some table dancing, but ginger guy on a table is not going to be a great thing in the UK, I'm sure. Interesting. Matt, so I don't know how you got into this space. I know obviously you've got kind of GoTime fame and Grafana fame, but how did you get into the whole space of, I guess, giving a damn about the community is probably the best way I can phrase it.
Yeah, I think it just probably was that. It was just like, would interact. The Go community when I got involved was very small. So it was just a handful of people that you could kind of get to know. And then it sort of grew organically like that from there. And just because I was doing Go for so long, then people would ask me, oh, can you explain this or can you teach this thing? And I think that was all it was. I was just very early by pure chance. And then Go has gone on from strength to strength. And I've just sort of kind of been taken along with it, really. So I don't really consider myself an educator. On GoTime, I try and act like the idiot.
Hey, that's my job.
Yeah. Well, you're doing it brilliantly. So like I try and be the person learning, but it's kind of like user experience when I come to think of this. Like you think about user experience when you're building a product. You think about the user, what are they taking from it, and I think that plays a big part in this. But it's not easy, for sure.
Yeah, it's kind of, I've repeatedly ran into like a lamppost again and again, like a lost lemming with some of this stuff. It's things on paper seem relatively simple, and then you get into the realization, just again and again, everybody's situation is different. Everybody's background's different.
Yeah.
The problems they're trying to solve is different, and they're coming at it with pockets of knowledge. Some of it's decades old, some of it's brand new. And then we've got all the kind of, can I call them isms? Like the modernisms of people coming up through the ranks where maybe they're not being truthful with themselves or those around them. So they kind of go, yeah, we know this stuff. Turns out that they really don't know it, but at which point it's like a whole audience nodding and it's too embarrassing to stop nodding and go, you know what, I don't know this stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's super interesting. So
Yeah,
like,
but it's important to do it. It's important to do it and make sure that you create an environment wherever you are where it's okay to not know something. Because the worst thing is when people are guessing, like you said, they don't feel like they can say, I don't know. Saying I don't know is like, you know, in an interview, if I'm interviewing somebody and they say, I don't know, that really goes up in my estimations. Like, I just think that's great. Like, honesty, clearly, confident that I don't know now, but I could maybe figure it out. So, yeah, I think people should say don't know more.
Sounds like an interview I do really well at. Can I just say like 10 don't knows in a row and I'll get back to you after I've Googled it or something?
Yeah, you probably, on that criteria that I've just described, you'd probably score the highest.
Wicked. Sounds like a dream. Yeah. So, Bill, your style of delivery in a classroom, it was kind of like preacher-like, and it left a mark. So, is that style intentionally practiced? Is it the kind of thing you do in a mirror in the morning, or is it just something you've developed over time?
I think we've all been in enough talks and trainings there. You want to just shoot yourself because the instructor is either just regurgitating something on a piece of paper or it's just boring, right? And you can only take about 20 minutes of boring. That's it, which is really why I think conferences should have 20-minute talks, because if the speaker's just not giving you enough entertainment value, you could sit through that and get through it. So it's always been my goal to, especially with my trainings, where we're there for 4 to 8 hours, you know, I got to keep somebody engaged, constantly engaged. So, you know, that adage, you treat people the way you want to be treated. I would say that's where the how I train kind of comes from. That's how I want to be treated in the classroom. So I do the same.
But Bill, it is something else to witness you doing that. I mean, and just describing it on this podcast isn't going to give people that experience. Like, if you haven't seen it, you probably can get a sense online, but even then. And I do think, Bill, if you wanted to, you could run a super cult. You have got that, the preacher style, like everyone would, you know what I mean? They'd be talking in tongue. I don't know what they do, like speaking in C++.
How do we know he doesn't already?
Yeah, he might well.
Yeah, no cults there.
I'd sign up there.
I think I say this to people and they don't necessarily agree with me, but I'm being truthful here. It takes a lot for me to understand something. Light bulbs just don't go on for me. I've met a lot of people where they look at something and it's just like, yeah, I get it. It's a struggle for me to learn and understand things. And I think that's helped on the teaching side, because by the time the light bulb goes on, I've really had to sort of consume that material at a probably at another level. And another thing that I really focus on are the words that I'm using to describe things. In the last training we just had at Grafana U, somebody came up to me and said, you know, I know a lot of the stuff you're teaching, but I really had no idea how to articulate it. And I think maybe that's a little bit of my strength, is to be able to articulate fairly well what it is I'm trying to explain. But that takes a tremendous amount of practice in writing. And my brain not getting things right away and having to struggle to figure out what that is.
So that's really refreshing to hear. Like, the amount of times I've listened to you or watched you do things and you think, oh man, like, yeah. And then knowing you have that battle. 'Cause I said to somebody this morning, actually, I feel like I'm the dumbest guy in the room always. And the only shining quality I've got is I've got grit. So I'll just keep running into the brick wall until I either go through it or pass out, one of the two, to try and grok something and try and get it to a position where I can understand it and take it to bits. I don't immediately get things. So that's kind of interesting to hear. But like, I guess, Bill, you these days, you structure things, and I don't know if it's always been the case, you structure things really well with your courses. So, like, you know, you've got the advanced classes. I mean, do you do, like, the beginner stuff as well?
I can't do a beginner programming class. That material, I think, is incredibly complicated to put together because you have to figure out, at some level, you have to draw a line in the sand and say that I'm not going to explain this, or I'm going to assume some level of knowledge, right? And so I think super beginner programmer material is some of the hardest stuff to to write. I'm much better when I say that. I say this all the time, right? I'm not going to teach you how to program, but I'll teach you how to engineer. So I'm assuming that you already know how to write code at some level. You can solve a problem. I want to teach you how to take that and then be a better engineer. I think that's where my strength is, and that's what I enjoy doing.
That's fascinating to know.
Yeah,
that really is.
There's something about when you have to teach something, you put a lot of work into being able to do that. So if you're doing a talk at a conference or a meetup or something, you spend time before preparing for that. So that might just sound really obvious, but a lot of people think, oh, I have to just know already how to do the talk because of my, it's something I'm working on. But actually, no, the doing the talk bit is a completely separate thing. And in the process of preparing for that, you actually learn usually the most. You learn so much because of, like Bill said, you have to go down and explain certain things. You have to dig in the right places, like in order to get this across. So that is actually a great way to learn something as well, is to try and actually teach it to somebody. And it really sort of focuses that.
I guess there's an area of humility though here, or being humble, I guess, because I know doing podcasts, Built FM's my thing, but I've been on other podcasts in the networking industry, and you always have to be the guy or the person that says, I don't know how that works. Can you explain that to me, guest? And you end up almost, I don't know, if you have an ego the size of a planet, it's very hard to step back and let somebody else explain what's already, dare I say, obvious, maybe because you've got some experience. But one of the things I'm trying to get to grips with Nats especially, it can go really deep really quickly. Surface level, everybody knows pub sub. Like if you get 100 people in a room and you go, tell me about pub sub, 100 hands go up. And you go, tell me about, I don't know, streaming. And then all of a sudden it's like you're left with 10 hands. Right. And then you show, right, now let's talk about that in production. And then you're left with one person going, I can't really do that. So you end up with this massive amount of assumed knowledge where you think you're having a meaningful conversation and then 90 people walk out the room who don't have the background information. So it was like the targeted question to Bill in terms of like the targeting of the material comes really important. And I know, Matt, you do that on GoTime a lot. You will ask like the dumb question to try and get the information out there and let that pass through, and that's hard. That's something that I'm still kind of fiddling with mentally, to be the person.
Here's the key. This is what I've learned over the last 10 years. Okay, there's a line as an educator, at least in tech. There's a line you have to walk between correctness and comprehension. Okay, you have to walk that line delicately, and sometimes you have to not be 100% correct, or I would say vague, not necessarily not correct, but vague, to gain the level of comprehension somebody needs. So what do I mean by that? I see way too many talks, even today, that want to talk about the mechanics or how things are implemented. And this is really dangerous to teach. I did it early on as well. And the reason you don't want to teach how something's implemented is because the implementation of things change all the time. And suddenly you've got material that's no longer valid because you wanted to explain the mechanics of something. That just happened to me with a blog post. One of my most popular blog posts talk about how the append function is implemented, and they changed the implementation, right? So now all that material is wrong. So if you're not to talk about the mechanics, what should you be focusing on? I try to tell this to people that give these mechanical talks. Forget about the mechanics. Focus on the semantics. Focus on the behavior of things, because the behavior is not, at least in Go, is not allowed to change. And so that's when I talk about, you walk that line between correctness and comprehension, right? I can teach you the behavior without being 100% accurate on the mechanics, as long as you see that behavior later on in your program. And I try to teach this to people all the time. And that's what Ultimate Go really is. It's really about the behavior. Sometimes we talk a little bit about the mechanics, but I'm always saying that could change, but the behavior won't. And so it's that, to me, even with Nats and anything you're teaching, is focus on how things behave and show that in the code examples and in those practical code examples. And your material will last forever. But if you want to focus on implementation, your material is only as good as until they change it.
Yeah, I think you've shot one of my bullets with a bullet. We're doing a lot of soul searching at the moment around exactly this topic in terms of how to get the assumed knowledge level right, then how to get the concepts across, and then you've obviously got the tracking the client libraries and the APIs and everything else, and that's where the grey areas appear. Once you start looking at the kind of concrete implementations, things fall apart very quickly, or the load on the team especially just increases, like massively increases. And I think lots of NATS is very stable, and then lots of NATS is changing at a rate of knots, and APIs are maturing and stuff. So finding that balance is super tricky. But I mean, even just going to meetups and standing at the back of rooms and listening to people get to grips with things, I just can't help but feel we've got a lot of, I don't know what the right term is, beginner experts, where people grasp like the minimal amount of surface area for something and then lean into that for like a long time, and then never really seem to move on. I mean, I think everybody's guilty of this in some ways, but I think I might be getting old is the problem. Like 20 years ago, I'd lean into something, spend a lot of time studying, and then build vertical silos of knowledge. And I know now the amount of stuff out there is incredible. It's just so much stuff, especially like, even in the AI space. You try and track some of that stuff and your brain melts. Are either of you seeing this, where it's kind of like the 9-to-5 mentality, do the bare minimum, walk away? I mean, are we just a bunch of nerds that kind of get passionate about things? I mean, where's the line at the moment for learning, do you think? Where's the appetite? I
think if your brain is melting, it's not actually a problem, because the AI will be able to replace it. So that's we're good point there. But yeah, this is the thing, because on teams that I work with, I'm very much about work-life balance. I want it to be sustainable. The times in my career when I've built the things I'm most proud of have been times when I'm like all in. I'm spending all hours in the day on it, and I'm like not sleeping. It's like those things. And you hear that. I don't like saying it really, because you hear sometimes you'll see it on Twitter, somebody going around saying, I wake up at 4 a.m, I eat 10 eggs.
Take a cold shower. Yeah. Wrestle my dog. 2 cold showers and a hot one. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. Like put on some really fast shoes and go for a run. Like, you know what I mean? Like those shoes that are really fast. Like you can tell just by looking at them how fast they are.
The ones with loads of stripes.
They've got stripes. That's it. Yeah. And I think that's what makes them go fast. So it's like, I never want to say like you have to do that, because I don't think you do. But in my experience, for me, the times when I've really dug in and learned something or got good at something, I get obsessed with it. That's how I then get good at it. It's just not the case for everybody.
So, interesting point. Sorry, go on, Bill. You're about to say something.
I was going to say 2 things at that point. They say that you have to spend 10,000 hours on something to be an expert, which I honestly believe. But here's the other thing that I think ties into your question. I've met a lot of people over the years that beat themselves up because they're not learning tech X or tech Y, which is now the most popular thing, right? And I've had to tell these people over and over again, don't tell me that you don't have enough time to spend on learning that, because it's not about time, it's about attention. And if you really wanted to learn that, you'd be putting your attention to it. So why don't you just be honest with yourself and recognize that this is something you're really not interested in, and stop beating yourself up over it because everybody else is interested in it right now and you're not. For me, that's AI and ML. I'm just not interested in it. I'm really not. And do I feel bad sometimes because I think the industry's going there? I do, but I have to pull myself back and say, but it's not something I'm passionate about. So I want to spend my time over here. And I'm not going to say I wasted. I spent a year learning blockchain, mainly because Miami became ground zero. And I'm really glad I spent a year doing that, because I really understand what's happening now in that space. But I could also look back on it and say I wasted a year because I could have spent that time learning other tech that maybe is going to help me in terms of revenue at Ardan or growth in other places. And I was thinking it might, but at the same time, I'm happy I spent my time and attention there for that year. The year before that, I learned GraphQL. I actually stole Matt's GraphQL client and cleaned it up for some of my own purposes.
Just kind of give it a sweep.
I spent a year on that. Again, I thought there was going to be business around GraphQL and everything that was going on, and ended up not. But I spent my year there. I was passionate about it for that year. So I just, the message I want people to hear is that find something that you're really passionate about. Don't feel guilty that you're not passionate about something else. And that time you spend may or may not end up being a career path, but at least you're doing what you want to do.
That's really interesting. So one of my old mentors, he was always banging on about, forget your weaknesses, be aware of them, but really double down on your strengths. Right. And then the problem is you go, well, what's the strength? I'm useless at everything. Maybe I can double down on being useless. I don't know. But no, that's
why you start a podcast.
Exactly.
You're not useless, David.
And on that note, we're gonna go to an advert break.
Oh.
Well, no, I'm terrible at this. I don't even have sponsors, so there's no advert break.
Oh, well, we could make one up if you like. New fast shoes from Bill Kennedy. They'll make you present fast like Bill.
In Go for Blue.
There you go.
And we're back. Look at that. First ad.
Seamless.
I love it.
Congrats.
It's absolutely seamless. Yeah, thanks. That's great.
Is there a break? No, there isn't really a break.
No, there isn't a break. Let's just go.
Break. Okay, it's blown
It
my
was
mind.
a fake break. Yeah.
Well, so because I was just going to say, I couldn't agree more with Bill on that. Again, it's hard to learn something if you don't care about it. But the other thing is, when you learn a new language, that seems like such a daunting thing. Once you've learned another language, and then you kind of play around with a couple of frameworks, and you start to realize that you get better at actually learning as well. So. And that's a skill worth investing in. Partly, I find if you're building something real, that's how you do it, because you really, your learning is prioritized for you because you need something, you need to solve these actual problems and you need to figure that out. And I think that's a great driver for it. But yeah, if you're really interested in something, that becomes very easy. It's still possible to do it, I think, learn things because you have to. And it's easier to do when you've got a specific problem you're solving, because then you get the problem solved. So at least you get something for it. So I think you should think about rewarding yourself for effort that you're putting in. And if you just love the thing, then just learning about it is the reward itself. But you can get good at learning stuff. So you shouldn't be too worried. I'd say to junior devs, don't be too daunted by that. Get stuck in, have a look, just have a try, just try things and see what sticks.
There's almost like this could have been scripted. You kind of led me beautifully into the next bit. Right. So, coin operator developers, mercenaries. The mercenaries are the software world, the ones that go out there and do consultancy, they do contracting. Maybe they're running agencies. Agencies seem to be hot right now. Getting information into those people's brains to say, you can solve challenge X, Y, or Z using this technology. And then getting to a point where you go, you know what? I do need to commit a month of deep dive to this. Getting that message out there, it's marketing. It's basically, can I call it? It's not really DevRel. I think first of all, it's marketing, getting the seeds planted. Then you get somebody on. Then it's DevRel and opening up the whole piece. So before either of you, deep dive, how do you get informed? Is it you're in the industry, you get a smell for it? Is it more that you have ideas where you want to go? A series of small bets from a skill point of view? I'm really interested in how the seeds get planted and then the decisions that both of you take to consume and commit and grow, or grow the knowledge. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's a massive set of questions.
Great question. I was going to let Bill go first.
Well, one of my jobs at Ardan is to act like a CTO in terms of looking at what technology is starting to gain some traction in terms of what I think our clients are going to need, what people are interested in. So I can try to be 6 months ahead of everything we're doing. So we made commitments this year in January for Rust because I just saw way too much chatter, and I started seeing clients talk about having Rust more and more sort of in their platforms. Now we've got one of the best Rust teachers out there, and we're building that. It takes a year to build anything in terms of your branding or presence, right? So we're 6 months into that. The other thing, so I'm constantly out there trying to listen to people, listening to the projects, seeing the talks that are coming up, for sure listening to the Go team. If you haven't been listening to the Go team, their next 18 months is going to be focused on onboarding. That's it. 3.5 million gophers out there. Generics is starting to bring the enterprises in. The Service Weaver project, by the way, is one of the first projects I've seen where they're showing how to use generics to build enterprise sort of platforms underneath. Amazing stuff what they're doing with generics. That's going to teach the enterprise how to move away from C# and Java and use Go in similar ways. So onboarding is a huge thing right now. And in line with that, just right, because the moment I realized that onboarding was going to be a big thing several months ago, I decided to redo the Go tour. So I've got my own Ardan tour now, much more comprehensive than the Go team has, right? Trying to stay 6 months ahead of that on the onboarding side. New books and new things like that and practical material. So that's sort of part of my job. The other thing I do at Ardan is we bring in guest speakers all the time. If I talk to somebody and they've got something cool, or I know somebody's got a talk they want to give or new tech, I bring them in and do a lunch and learn at Ardan. So,
oh, nice.
Oh, yeah.
Cool.
And so my team is constantly seeing some of the latest tech that's out there. So Alan Sheevy, who's Grok, right? Ngrok that he wrote?
Love Ngrok, yeah.
Okay, so he built all new sets of APIs. So you basically have ingress in the net packages, and right? I had him come in almost day one when I saw it and teach my team how to use that stuff. So
that's cool.
We're doing that too, because as an agency where I'm at, we're being asked by customers all the time, tell us how we're supposed to do this. If you're not expanding your world of knowledge on tech and things, then you're only going to provide the same solution over and over again.
It's an interesting aside. I met him actually at KubeCon EU. We went over like the embeddable Ngrok stuff for ingress and dev environments. That was pretty cool. Okay,
amazing.
Interesting. So Matt, what about you? How do you kind of look at the industry, and where do you place your poker chips?
Yeah, I've never really had a plan in my whole kind of career, honestly. So, and this kind of extends to this. I am very instinctive and just really motivated by solving a specific problem. And I'm happy to use anything to solve that problem. I happened to, like when Go came along, a lot of the ideas in it resonated. And so it was a kind of natural fit. It was around simplicity in the language. Just the fact it didn't have all these language features. I was doing C# and Ruby before. The fact that it had this minimalist set was really resonated, because in those other languages, I gave myself only a minimalist subset of the language. And I do it still today in JavaScript. If I'm even writing React or something, I won't use most of the features. I'll just use the absolute basics. Another reason why I like Svelte.js, because it's kind of like front-end framework that has this kind of minimalist attitude. So it's something about it feels right, because it values align.
Like an amplifier, really, I guess.
Yeah.
You kind of find something that delivers massive returns for the investment.
Yes, but also the fact that it lines up with things I already believe in. I think that for Go, that was definitely it. And I see that still around, when there's different technologies like HTMX, I think is really interesting. And again, it appeals because it has a real simple idea. It's something that's already been around. It's already in front of us, already there, kind of.
In stealth. I mean, on the HTMX thing, I think most people know what hypermedia is, but when you start looking at APIs and actually web dev, it's a right cacophony of mishmash solutions and JSON RPCs and all sorts of horrendous things that people go, oh, it's HTTP, and it's like, yeah, but it's not.
Right. Yeah.
It's a mess.
Yeah. So that's it. There'll be some interesting, and the other thing is Twitter, frankly. So social groups and what my friends are talking about is a great indicator. That's usually where I hear most things first. And it doesn't have to be a massive network for that to work. So but yeah, being part of groups, online groups are great, very accessible. meetups and stuff like that, of course, and conferences you do. It's always packed with new stuff that you know. There's so much there. It's like Christmas sometimes. Sometimes we'll just be sat backstage, mind blown. Not only because the image is reversed when you're backstage, so all the code looks like flipped. That's mind blowing in itself.
Trip.
But just some of the new concepts and new things or new tools, I've discovered lots of little things like that way. So it doesn't tend to be very planned or like I'm placing chips carefully, although it's even in that analogy, it's completely random. What are you doing? What do you mean you're placing chips carefully? Like it's random. Put them wherever you want and go home.
It wouldn't work for me. I've got a beagle. He just run out and eat them.
David,
Boom.
Matt has a superpower that I think is overlooked way too much. Matt is able to identify and execute on product. I have tried for 30 years to build a product. I've done it twice, and both times it's failed miserably. And I've seen Matt build a handful of products that have been incredibly successful. And I know it has nothing to do with education we're talking about here, but that to me is the most amazing skill set that anybody can have. It's an incredibly special skill set because apparently I don't have it, and I have no idea how he does it. I'm always like this with Matt on product because that is the hardest thing in the world.
For anybody listening to this right now, Matt's gone red.
Yeah, I don't come on podcasts for people to be nice to me. This is a big surprise. So thanks, Bill. That really means a lot.
What have we done, Bill? You broke Matt. No, that's really good. That's one hell of a compliment.
Yeah,
I think a whole podcast on just how do you identify product that people actually need, that people will pay for, that you can dog food or not dog food. That to me are podcasts I love listening to because that's just magical stuff right there.
I'm kind of obsessed with that right now for different reasons. But I'm going back to your and not to detract from Matt. No, I mean I'm kind of bowing down. I'm not worthy and all that. And like genuinely, you guys on this is kind of scared me a little bit. But you said everything around education, and it's not relevant to building products. But I'd kind of argued that if you have the insight and the ability to deliver something, you've clearly read the smoke signals, you've been at the right water coolers, you've had the conversations, you've found the market need. Not only that, you can have a market need where people go, yeah, that's cool. And you can have 100,000 people say, that's great. And you can make, $0. But then having somebody put the money where their mouth is and buy that, I mean, that's like next level. It's like the 0.1% of the 1% that builds something. Yeah. And that's a whole set of things. And the amount of people I see offering education and Twitter courses and email courses, and they've it's their first venture into building things and delivering something. And you think, well, that's kind of
so. My products are educational products, right? My videos, my training classes. By the time you see me, I've probably done it 1,000 times already. But what guides me on my educational products is understanding that I'm targeting the average developer who wants to be told what to do first and foremost, but still have the flexibility to adapt based on the constraints. And these developers they want to be told what to do because they have to build things in real time, but they also want to feel like they're engineering at the same time. They're not just, plugging wires in. So
copy pasta.
Right. And so all of my training products are really around making you a better engineer, telling you what to do, right? Like in general, this is what you should do. Here are some exceptions, and this is how you can take those exceptions within the scope of the material that I'm teaching, right? And that only happens because I'm an average developer using the same code that I'm teaching in client projects. And we know this code is working, right, at some level. It's not just toy code. It's not somebody sat down and wrote a little something and said, here, this is real production. At least my service class is real production level code. We're using it every day. And we're learning every day. And it's changing every day. And you're getting the benefits of us learning as well. I think that's the best material out there.
You've hit something else I wanted to cover, actually. So I kind of cracked a joke off this week about the amount of blog posts out there where somebody's sharing their 2 cents of wisdom. And at the bottom, you've got like a red and bold statement, don't put this in production. And the line to go from that to production, it's like, well, And then you end up finding a blog article that, was written 3 years ago and then it was unfinished and there's no comments. And it's like, well, where did the person go? Did they put it in production? Is it still, or you find an open source library and you start banging your head against the desk and think, well, where's all the experience? And then you think, well, hang on a minute. If this is a high value thing, clearly there are coin operator people out there that are doing this and making good money. So then the next thing comes down to how much of your wares do you put out there? So how much of your value? So I guess it's different for both of you. So Matt, you'll put your knowledge and know-how into product, and Bill, your product is education. So do you kind of give it everything, or do you hold cards back for the next thing? I mean, how does that work?
If anything, for me, I have to really make sure I'm providing the MVP of things, right? I don't want to overwhelm you. So the MVP for everything you need related to, say, a service, including observability. Here's something interesting. We were just at GopherCon EU, and one of the members of the Service Weaver team at Google was there. And they're doing a bunch of workshops now to teach how to use Service Weaver to build services and deploy them. And I said to them pretty clearly, I said, this is all great, but if you don't have an actual project out there in a repo that's solving a real world problem like I am, which is a garage sale API, right, that requires CRUD and transactions and the whole 9 yards. If you don't have that project built, then everything you're doing is essentially a toy and nobody really knows. I said, you know what would be cool? Why don't you solve the same problem I'm solving in service with Service Weaver, and we'll have 2 projects out there solving the same problem in different ways, and now people can see and compare and choose which one they want to go to. Do they want more flexibility and know-how around the code on engineering, or do they really just want to build some business logic and deploy it? Both are fair. But if you're solving the same problems, now people have 2 different ways to see how you can solve that. They thought it was a good idea, and I'm hoping that they're going to go ahead and actually build out a true project repo like I've done, solving that particular problem using Service Weaver. That is what we need. You don't need little programs. Solve an actual product, build an actual service to some level. It doesn't have to be 100% complete, but give people everything they need as a starter kit, and we're going to help the industry forward.
Yeah, I love that.
I love that
where
too.
the rubber meets the road.
Yeah, this is where things can be very academic when you're learning something. They often are. The reason I was attracted, I did the book Go Programming Blueprints, and in that each chapter you actually build a thing. So you're actually doing something. You're actually building something real. And I said this a while ago. Like that to me makes the difference. But to answer your question, and this is an interesting one because I got criticized a little bit early for some of the things I do with like just tweeting out stuff or writing blog posts and just sharing it and stuff. And some people were saying, this is really valuable. You should package it up or whatever somehow. Obviously, I do have a book. I don't want to keep saying it. But I found that like Bill doesn't hold back. If anything, he's trying to make sure it's the right mix so you're not overwhelmed. But being really generous with stuff, I found I just started sharing this knowledge. I just kind of started doing it just for its own sake. And then the sort of benefits from that just come back at you. It's just phenomenal. You get work from it. You get offered, people will want you to consult. They'll want, you make friends. That's another thing that can happen. You may get to speak at conferences. You might get invited to podcasts or whatever. This opens up a whole world. And really the sort of, my experience is the more generous I've been in just sort of giving stuff away, the more I then get back in return, like by an order of magnitude. So there's something, I'm sure some people, and some people, this is their business. They've got to be strategic. And it isn't mine. I never relied on it. So I was kind of free to just do that, just be very generous. And even then I get all this great, I get these great opportunities opening up and things. So yeah, that would be my advice. And the other thing is, when it comes to like product and how you build, how do you find the things that are, that stand a better chance of doing well or not? First thing to say is we've been very lucky, like for sure. So like it's a bit like asking someone who won the lottery to write a book about how to win lotteries. and some people will, like, they'll win a lottery, and after, they'll sell a company, and then it's like, right, here's how to sell a company. I'm sure have great lessons and things like this, but we have to acknowledge that basically we get lucky, and it's a strike of lightning, or a like of strikening.
It all computes. I won't worry about it.
It should be a syntax error, though. I think that second one. And I was going to say, play around. Like I'm very playful anyway, so I like messing around, and like, I'm not a particularly serious person. And being playful like that in tech, that is where I've found opportunities. Things you think, you realize, this works nicely. These things work nicely together. Here's something we could do. And then also, like, do that with great people. Surround yourself with great people you get on with well, people that have different ideas to you. It's very tempting to just match. You meet someone and it's like, we basically all agree on loads of stuff. We've got the same skills. Let's start a company. But really, you need competing skills. You need
entropy, don't you?
Yeah,
I think
you do, yeah.
There's so much I've tried to observe over the years. You go off, you join a company, you get talking with some folks. For a while, I ended up in a company full of people who love Clojure, like the language, and it scared the bejesus out of me. I'm like, I can't actually get my head up. My brain just doesn't work like this. I mean, I come from C originally, and then moved to Go because it was like, yay, all of the Go's great, and I can dump all the bits of C I don't like anymore. But for me, that was the wrong water cooler. I couldn't get my head around some of the stuff that they were building, and it was beautiful and it was great. But I think the variety of life and almost being a social nomad, walking around between different groups, going to different conferences, and all of a sudden you get a wider image of a wider view where the smoke signals are coming from. And it's hard. I mean, it's an interesting one from an education point of view, putting yourself out there and just going, what if there's a better way of doing this? What if I've missed something?
Yeah, so how did you know that Clojure wasn't going to be the thing for you? What was that like?
I tried writing stuff. I literally gave myself a pet project and was like, right, I'm going to build something.
Great.
And then I eventually just didn't.
Yeah.
I just kind of gave up and went, I can't do this. This is not how my brain works. And I spent time. I bought books. I went on like an online course. I had a friend spent ages just going through code, and I'm like, I just can't. My brain doesn't work like this. And then what it did, though, it unlocked stuff around functional programming, like lots of recursive style programming and tail jumps and stuff. My brain kind of went, I kind of get some of that now.
Yeah.
But I couldn't embrace. I mean, what you could do in like 50 lines of code took me 300 lines of code in Go.
Right.
But I just don't work that way. So I had to kind of go, that's great. That's not for me.
Yeah.
Go find a different conversation.
I think you did that that's kind of the perfect way to do it. You really gave it a shot. It's okay that it's a no. I think it should just be okay that, this isn't for me. But I love your point. Even in that process, you will learn things that you can apply in other places. There'll be ideas, or there'll just be concepts. Like, sometimes thinking about the same thing from a different angle really unlocks something else. And it's like different languages let you do that, because there are very common things about these languages, and there's things that sometimes very different. Variety is the spice of life. Introducing, this is an ad break now. It's Bill's hats. Get hats from Bill. Comes with speed stripes. Also comes in fast.
And this month only, you get 3 album covers of your choice, signed, first editions.
Just the covers. Nice. Just the covers, though.
Just the covers. Yeah, I don't think he does music yet. So yeah, unless you do music, Bill. In which case, I mean, by all means, ship an LP or an EP or something.
Yeah. Only some karaoke. That's it.
Record that.
Yeah,
we need that.
Get that on the podcast.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let me go back to something that Matt said, because I think this is important, and I've tried to tell this to others that I know are building and selling educational material. Any material that I produce, whether it's a live class to video to books, is absolutely 100% available for free to anyone who can't afford it. I have a scholarship form, and I made my company on the form say, how much can you afford? Because I don't want to go back and forth trying to pretend or police. I've tried to tell my team all the time, it is not for you to think or judge if somebody is lying, that they want to pay $10 and they can pay $800. Stop. not for us to do that. It's their conscience, and I believe in karma. So all of the material that we have, at least the stuff I produce, there's stuff that others produce that I can't just, personally just give away. But anything that I produce, 100%. And I've tried to tell this to other trainers that are out there. Do you want to build material that nobody sees, or do you want to build material that's making a difference? That's what you want to do. And not everybody on the planet can afford the material you're producing. And I'd rather it be seen than shelved. And to match point, karma will come back tenfold. I asked my team actually this week, because I was just curious, how much have we given away in terms of video this year so far? And they didn't run the full numbers, but they came back and said it was well over 50,000 already.
Wow.
In terms of our sticker pricing, right? In terms of our sticker pricing, for whatever that's worth. I still think our sticker pricing is super cheap. I've seen people charge $2,000 a head for the stuff that we're charging like $700 for. So, but $700 could be somebody's monthly salary.
Yeah.
How can you ask them for that? You can't.
When you're living
right?
on baked beans, $700 is.
Yeah.
And so somebody shouldn't have access to educational material because they can't afford it. That's ridiculous to me.
Yeah, so I can get Bill back now with a compliment, because this is something that a lot of people don't realize, but Bill will often be at the airports around conferences very early and very strange hours, collecting people, shipping them around. Sometimes these are people that this is the first time leaving their own countries. And, Bill's the one that then meet them at the airport. Do you know what I mean? Think of that. What do they think of us?
The GoBridge scholarships. Yeah, the GoBridge scholarships that we offer.
Yeah. So these scholarships enable people to, like Bill said, really does help. But I don't know, there's just a lot, not just that as an idea is great. There's a lot of work goes into actually implementing that as well, that I just think is invisible to people. And I've only glimpsed it, and it's just I'm blown away, So I think this is about surrounding yourselves with good people. And this is what I think the Go community tries to do, tries to be a good, welcoming community that's going to be helpful if we can be, and we're going to be friendly, and hopefully we can have a laugh as well.
I mean, there's 3.5 million developers and tens of thousands of companies using Go. There is no reason to be in competition with each other. We should be supporting and lifting each other up. Anytime a new book comes out, anytime somebody has a new training, Service Weaver is competition for me. But it doesn't matter. There's enough people and enough different styles of learning that why would I do that instead of embrace?
Yeah.
Because at some point you meet somebody that isn't jiving with the way you do things. Hey, why don't you try this, and vice versa. And so there's no reason to compete against each other. If we work together, it's just going to be more people doing Go and more companies doing Go and more opportunities for everyone.
I love that way of looking at things. I spent a long time in networking software for my sins and network automation. And regularly we'd work with the frenemies. So whatever company I was working for, we'd meet up and go to a meetup with the competition, and we'd talk about how we're approaching things and how we're building things. Not often loved by the marketing teams of the companies I was working for, or the VPs of the board. But without that, the customers that would buy from, I'm not going to mention the names, just potentially for legal reasons, but where they would buy products from 3 or 4 vendors. They wanted to see products that would kind of work together with this common set of tooling. They didn't necessarily care that we were in competition. So, what are you doing really? If you're working for the customers and potential customers and the people in the community, then do the right thing by them, and everything kind of, I don't want to say it comes good, because you can have lots of bad luck, but it's really interesting. I'm panicking now because of a lack of time. There's so many places, and I wanted to take this and talk about, but
I was just going to say,
a couple of things.
Just a quick tip.
Go for it.
Yeah, don't worry about the legal things. This podcast getting sued would put it on the map.
You know what? They could take 75% of my global revenue, and I think I'd survive.
There you go. So you're in a great position.
I think I'd be fine. Honestly,
sometimes you just gotta ask for forgiveness, man, instead of permission. That's all.
Yeah, I think it depends what legal team you come up against. I have had issues in the past with the blog. So I ran a blog called ipengineer.net, which was a networking blog, and actually that blog got me like 3 jobs. So I'm not going to knock it.
Nice.
But one day I wrote a competition piece. Well, not a competition piece, a comparison piece between 2 dueling vendors. And on one Friday night, I had a lovely phone call with a legal team that rang me out the blue, and the CEO was on the call and the CTO was on the call. I'm like, what the hell's this? So I've been in those waters. Anyway, moving on. It's interesting history. Yeah. The intersection between, all right, so a programming language and either a library or a platform or a system that can help you solve a problem, right? How do you get signals about that? And clearly, you kind of know what I'm hinting at. I mean, I'm soul searching in some ways of how to do NATS justice. But for instance, if you know you've got some problems to solve, let's pretend it's not around, I don't know, messaging. It's around satellite communications. You want some satellite feeds, but you know, you work with Go. You want some Go libraries. I mean, what do you do? Do you look at what's out there? Do you take recommendations? Do you look at, well, there's a Go client, so I'll start there? Or do you find a product that appears to work and then worry about the integration later? I mean, where does your mind go when you're, you know, expanding the feelers to solve problems that maybe you've not solved before?
Jay, I just introduced NATS into my last client project because we did need service-to-service message communication and everything that goes along with what NATS provides, right? And there's lots of products out there that can solve that same problem, right? But we went with NATS, and I think the answer to your question is that out of sight, out of mind. So if you're a products company, when that moment comes up, when somebody says, you know, we need this, or this is the problem we need to solve, right? And they decide they're not going to build it for whatever reason, then you need to be in the conversation. I had this problem with Caddy. I was helping Matt Holt early on with Caddy. We actually funded a year of development for him because I really believed in the product. And one of the first things I had told him was, let's get Caddy on a drop down on all the major clouds for ingress and right. Let's let Caddy be an option. It may not be the default, but if it's not even an option, then it's not even in play.
I love that.
And so from my perspective on things like NATS, things like Caddy, things like, right, you have to be present as an option. And if I was at NATS doing DevRel, that's where my head would be. How do I get the world to, when the time comes to choose a technology that NATS can solve, right, or that can be used to solve whatever, how do I get it to at least be in play? After that, now it's got to sit on its technical merits.
Sure.
But it's just like the resume. I help people with resumes all the time. In fact, I just had a kid recently. I saw his resume. He's like, dude, you're not getting any job. Nobody's asking you to come in, right? He's like, no. I go, here's the resume format. Do this. We cleaned it up. He got a job at Boeing 3 weeks later.
Whoa.
Nice.
I'm fortunate to have that sort of track record with resumes because I know what a resume needs to accomplish. And now he got the job himself. I got him the interview, right? As it relates to the resume. To me, it's the same thing, right? You've got to be there where somebody's decided to look at that resume. You're in play. And then after that, you've done your job. That's all you can do.
So you got him in the conversation. I love that.
You got to be in the conversation. So how do you get in the conversation? I think you got to have talks, and you got to be at the meetups, and you got to be at Ardan Lab companies where you're saying, hey, I got to talk. If you know you're in a city, when I go to a city, like I was just in London, I ended up getting 3 workshops, one-day workshops in London because we said, hey, Bill's going to be there. I was in Berlin. Hey, Bill, do you want Bill? I was in New York, and we reached out to clients and said, hey, Bill's going to be in town. You want him to come by for lunch for an hour? And we did that. You have client lists. You should be, when you're on the ground, hey, David's in town this week. You want Dave to come by and talk to your team, give them an hour. That kind of stuff is so important to be doing, especially like for you, David, as you're going there. So you got to be present. It just sucks because you got to be on your feet, right? COVID scared me to death because suddenly Bill was out of sight, right? My job is to be in sight, to constantly have Ardan sort of in the conversation, even if I don't market it directly. And suddenly you get 2 years where you're disappearing, right? I mean, it's a scary thing.
Absolutely.
But then now people pay you to have lunch with them, so it's all turned
they don't
around.
pay me to have lunch with them. I go, that's a free, but the idea. So here's the thing, right? While I'm having lunch, my my partner that does development and new business
hacking into their systems.
To the people. He's hacking into the people that set it up.
Right.
And so you see what's happening, right? We're having conversations every time we're there.
So yeah, spreading the word. So it's like the kind of spreading the word of gospel and lead them into the church. That's probably a bad analogy.
That's a great one for Bill because it's got that whole preacher vibe thing.
That's true. Yeah. Even the hair.
Yeah, it's a really good point though about the. Let's not talk about hair, shall we? I can't compete.
Oh, I don't know. Like I'm kind of joining you, Matt, like slowly. I'm ginger as well, which doesn't help.
Yeah, you get sued. You get sued at some point for that. Hopefully.
Yeah.
But I was going to say, Nats. What thing I like about Nats is the developer experience around it. And honestly, one of our past companies, Machinebox, was really a developer stuff. Like we had a great technology inside Docker containers, but it was really a developer experience that really sold it. That was the thing that we just put so much effort into doing that. And it makes all the difference, I've found. The fact that you can run Nats just embed it. You can just have it embedded in your program. So you don't have to worry about, like, you can actually start to use the concepts and use Nats as the thing right inside your binary without actually needing all the complexity of having like multiple machines and the server version.
Yeah, it's pretty magical. It is cool.
Yeah, so like little decisions like that makes it very accessible and makes it playable. There's something about as developers, and especially for me, I love playing around. I love to try things. The easier that is to just hook up, if I could just import Nats and then start pushing messages in and seeing things come out. Like the sooner I can do that, and the reward I get, the payback for my little investment, that's what fuels and pays for really the next bit of investment I then put into it. And it's kind of like, that's the deal. I'll do a bit of work, but I really want something back from the tools. I want something that's delightful or that's really exciting and gives me this feeling of that potential of now I can build things. So that for me is tapping into that is key.
Interesting. So I know, again, I keep looking at the time and going, we're running out. From a perspective of learning new tech, what are your preferences for new tech in terms of content? Is it like you go through the readmes, you go through some docs, you kind of get like the new 101 videos and figure out if it's going to be, something that you're interested in? I mean, what are your preferences and what do you look for? I'll throw that over to Bill first.
I got a new blog series that should be coming out next week, and it's on the experimental slices package. Why? Because they're talking about bringing it into the standard library. But we're gonna basically have posts that show every API from the experimental packages first, right? And start showing people that this stuff exists. So, I've written just about everything I think that I can write about in terms of Go. There's nothing terribly exciting for me anymore. But the idea that we're going to have a new package in the standard library that's taking advantage of generics, I think that's good stuff. People should see that and know that stuff exists. And so I'm always looking at maybe the release notes that are coming out for Go. Is there anything newer that I find interesting? Anything that can help the average developer sort of be better there. And then I'm totally just trying to write my ultimate service book, which, that's a long, tedious sort of process. But I just released chapter 2 on modules. That's available to everybody for free. And so that's kind of where my focus is, trying to write that stuff down. It's one thing to build out the code and I can go on stage and I can teach it and I can talk about it. It's another thing. How do you write that? I see too many books that want to tell a story around a practical piece of code, and it drives me crazy. Jane one day woke up and decided that Jane was going to build this. And then Jane, and I'm pulling my hair out going, I don't care about the story.
Yeah.
Talk to me about the code and the design philosophies and the guidelines and the idioms and the decisions you make. The story doesn't matter, right? I see it way too much, but it's a hard thing to write.
Interesting. I like that. I remember that about you.
I had a book that was like that, Bill. It was a C++ book, and it was like a story of a lecturer, and the author was the lecturer, and then he had this class of people. But I genuinely couldn't stick with it because he would like teach some basic concept, and then he'd have one of the like students ask a question that nobody would ask. You'd only ask it if in order to set up the next bit of his course. And it just felt so unnatural. So it's like, oh yeah, and this is how you do pointers. And it's like, oh cool. But I don't need to use pointers, do I? I can just do it like this. And he's like, no, I'm glad you asked that. And it's all written by one person. It really frustrated me. So I couldn't do it.
But you would never do that in a talk. You would never do that on video.
Yeah, just
why people think it makes sense in written language, I don't know.
You kind of do it in sales meetings. You put a stooge. So I think Matt's talking about book stooges. That's pretty cool. They're like planted their own stooge. It's weird.
Yeah. Although I suppose it could be funny. It just wasn't. And it was, so I don't know. Maybe if it was like a fun story, you'd be engaged. But honestly, yeah, like I agree with Bill. Like it's sort of like focusing on something real. The authenticity is important, isn't it?
You know what's funny? When I wrote the first book, we were using us and we. And I had Russ Cox read one of the chapters, and he said, stop using us and we. We, Bill, are not doing anything together. It's you and I. And that's always sort of stuck with me. So if you ever really see my material, it's always you and I because of that.
Oh. Have you seen in the social medias the last month or so, there was a huge debate on using we and us versus I and me. Just from a point of view of, you're projecting grandeur, you're projecting a successful company. And it's like, stop doing that. If you're one person sitting in, your mum's basement, then be the person sitting in your mum's basement and say, I'm good at this. I might smell, but I'm good.
Yeah. It's about being authentic. Like people can tell. You want to present. You've got an idea. You want to present something that's fake. People can just see through it. So just don't do it. You'd rather people don't like you. I certainly would. I'd rather. Some people think I'd put on an act, and in a way, like you do sometimes. Like when sometimes you're playing up a bit.
You have to sometimes.
Yeah, but well, Matt, you have to have this balance of having a strong opinion, but being flexible enough to listen and potentially change your mind. Because if somebody thinks that they could debate you and change your mind, they'll be more receptive to your strong opinion as opposed to you being an ostrich and sticking your head in the sand.
Yeah,
now, I don't really care what you're saying because you're not going to listen to me.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And something we try and do on GoTime is say we don't know and listen to different ideas and try and set that example, because you're right. And if you can do that, if you create a culture where that's happening, then everyone's empowered to speak up, everyone can chip in, and you'll get the best ideas. And also you have to be forgiving of bad ideas or things that don't work. You have to sort of immediately forgive that. And that also is something that takes a bit of time to learn, I think.
I had a client recently that I was doing some consulting with, like 2 hours a day for a few days a week. And at some point they looked at me and they said, Bill, I never thought you were going to be open and flexible like you are to my thoughts and ideas and constraints and needs. And it was that made her feel really comfortable working with me, right? Because she knew that at the end of the day, we could engineer something together. And she must have heard me say, if you work with me on code, you'll hear me say 1,000 times a day, I don't know enough yet. I don't know enough yet. I don't know enough yet.
Yeah.
Right? You want to make it this to short? I don't know enough yet. So let's just stay here.
Yeah.
Right? And as soon as we know, we'll do more.
Well, I love that, especially senior people like you saying that, Bill, because it shows that never changes. When you're junior, that is your whole life. You're like, I don't know this, I don't know it, I'm going to have to learn it. But that doesn't change. Actually, getting good at doing that is probably the valuable bit, rather than knowing all the stuff in your head and acing an interview. Having the skills to be able to dig in, to go and find out how to solve problems, like that's really the valuable thing. And it's nice to see that. You see an example of that when you say that, I think.
And in my service class, I'll also sit on stage and I'll say, you know what? This is how I started this piece of code. I was wrong. I learned I was wrong. We've learned this is better, right? So I'm also very conscious that material is out there. So I try really hard to make sure that when we identify a potential problem or a better way, I update it almost immediately and make it clear to people, right? Because I can't predict the future. I just know what I know now. And it worked now, but guess what? We found a scenario where there was a flaw in this, and this is a better way. That's in fact, that's learning, right? I mean, that's life.
Yeah.
I think there's a duality to this stuff. So if you're a learner, there are very few one-way doors, unless you spend your whole life learning like Haskell or something or mainframes and then going, oh, damn it, things didn't go how I kind of foresaw. But when you're teaching downstream or sharing knowledge, I think you have to be careful not to generate those doors. I mean, what do people say? It's better to have an idea and be wrong and then be aware that you're wrong than have no idea at all and go nowhere.
Yeah.
Better to do something wrong.
I think you got to be clear with people that there are no absolutes in engineering. There's always engineering is knowing when to take the exception and why you're taking it.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's
a good point. There's no. It's very much not right and wrong, and often sometimes personal taste and just like where your interest is will swing a decision. But I think that is important to know that we will be wrong. We're probably wrong. We just have to be okay with that, and we have to be able to fix it later when we find out we're wrong.
And if you're managing developers, I think what's also really important is giving them sometimes the day or two to let them figure out for themselves that their ideas aren't necessarily. I had an engineer come to me one day, and they said they wanted to do this. I knew in my heart it wasn't going to work, but I didn't want to just shut the door and say, no, it's not going to work, because I knew the personality of this person, and that would have just been like deflating for them. So I said, you got 2 days, work out a prototype and come back to me in 2 days and we'll discuss it. And within a day, they came back and they said, Bill, it's not going to work. And what was beautiful about that moment was that it wasn't me saying no, it was them saying no. And that day that you might have felt like I lost was the most productive day probably that week with that developer.
I've got a similar story to share on that. So for a while, I worked with an open source platform called Stackstorm. So I wrote modules. I was like one of the kind of DevRel community people. I'd also do the trainings. So I used to do like a 4-day training course. And the early training kind of sessions, they were very much spoon-fed. It was like 4 days of do this, do this, do this. And they didn't learn a damn thing. People went and go, yeah, that's great. And don't get me wrong, they put it into production, but none of the values really crept in. And then I had I think an aha moment. And actually, it was just before I met you, Bill, for the first time, where I put a load of booby traps in the training material. So I kind of left a lot of stuff missing and let people basically run into a brick wall, trip up. And in some cases, if they followed blindly, it wouldn't work. And that drove some interesting results. It kind of made the points land home. But I think the problem is when you've got 4 days to deliver something and you're being paid I say astronomical amount of money if you're working for a nice American blue chip, then with the days and all that, you've got to get some stuff out there. So I think the booby traps have got to be numbered. But I think if you're managing a team of developers and you've got some longer term objectives, and giving them space to think and maybe, helping them along and having those realizations, I think that's beautiful. I love that.
Yeah, it also leaves room, Bill, for you to be wrong. Your instinct when this person explained the idea was definitely not going to work. They may have figured something out that you hadn't thought of, and you created a space where that's possible.
I told him when he left, I go, I hope I'm wrong.
Right.
I literally said to him, I hope I'm wrong and you come up with a solution that I haven't thought about.
Yeah.
I literally said that to him. Yeah, that would have been an exciting day. I love finding the exceptions and saying something and somebody goes, yeah, what about this? And go, oh yeah, you're right. Shoot. Okay. And then incorporating that the next time you teach it.
Yeah. Yeah, David, what you said about putting the booby traps in the code reminds me of how, did you know that maps have deliberate errors in them? They just have like made up streets and made up areas because they used to get copied.
I only found that out though, like a month ago.
Did you go to a street that didn't exist?
I did, yeah, absolutely. I photocopied them, and I didn't really. But no, somebody else told me. I think I was drinking beer somewhere and said, hey, this is a fake place. I'm like, what? It's not there.
What, you were in the place though, having a beer, and they were like, this place doesn't exist. And then like,
I'm just
then
not
it just goes
exciting.
black.
Yeah, well, that's it. And then all of a sudden you realise that we live in a simulation, and that part of the matrix, it wasn't, what's the right word, cartographed out?
Yeah, exactly.
It just broke the system. For sure.
Cartographed out.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Right, I want to do some takeaways very quickly. So around
Indian,
developer
please.
education, any particular style? Are you like a chicken tikka man?
I don't mind a nice mild thing. I like a SARG.
A mild?
Love a song.
Very nice. Interesting. I can make some good recommendations for you then for London. In fact, I met, check this out. Claim to fame, I sat next to and had a conversation with a TV chef yesterday on a train.
Wow.
And she was lovely. I had never heard of her because I don't really watch TV, but apparently she's really quite famous. So I can send you to her restaurant. Who knew? Dipna Anand.
I beg your pardon?
Dipna Anand.
Dipna Anand.
Yep, lovely Indian lady. So there you go. If you want to eat well in London, go and find Dipna's places.
Oh, yeah.
There you go. Anyway, 3 takeaways. I'm going to leave Matt drooling over the food for now, because obviously I've just realised he's in London.
Yeah.
3 takeaways for, I guess, developers who are, constantly looking for sources of education, looking to improve themselves, knowledge. Bill, have you got any kind of off the top of your head that fly out?
You have to figure out first what works best for you. Blog posts, video, or live training. You have to be real honest with yourself. Everybody is better. I hate video for the most part. I have to run it at 1.5, 2, because my brain needs information coming at me fast. Anytime I watch a talk online, it's usually 1.5, 2. I just need that, right? Or I get anxious. I love blog posts as long as I can skim them, and live training if the trainer is, lively. But I probably gravitate to written word. And so you just got to be real honest with what works best for you, and then find the best sources in that medium.
Interesting. All right, Matt, words of wisdom.
Yeah, I can't really improve on that. I think Bill's really hammered that one. I'd say play around, try and align something that gets you excited, your interest, with something that's also going to be valuable for somebody else. That's really the sweet spot. So don't take on projects just for the money. It's really tempting, and sometimes you might need to. But if you don't care about the project, you very quickly get used to the money, and then you're stuck with this project. So try and only do things you care about. Align interests with others too, and meet great people and hang out with them.
I like that. I could probably terribly boil that down. I think almost. Yeah, don't try and be great at everything. Be great at a small number of things and excel. But there you go. So hey, thank you both for this. This has been phenomenal. I'm pretty pleased to say, actually, I don't think we need to do many or any edits. That's kind of pretty cool. I might put some fake ads in now for Bill's, albums just for the hell of it, and Matt's book as well. There we go. And yeah, thanks again, gents. This has been great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your time.
Pleasure. Just because you had the gripes section.
I did, and I've run out of time, because I ran out of time yesterday, and now I'm panicking that I keep running out of time for things. So let's gripe. You got some gripes. Let's do it.
Cookie boxes. The cookie, accept my cookies box.
Oh, those cookies. I went to food. Yeah. See, I'm at that. It's that time of day. You went to India, and I went to cookies. Yeah. Sorry, cross.
I would accept those cookies. The cookie, but what's this? Like, you've got accept, reject. It gets in the way of everything. I'm in a rush. I'm trying to find out if it's normal to say cheers, mate, to a cash machine ATM after you've got your cash out. I haven't got time to be going through this. They have the advanced settings. And it's like, you can accept, reject. I need the button that is whoever was involved in the decisions and the laws, and anyone that did the design, the implementation, all those people, I want them dead. That's the button I want. Click. It's a bit harsh.
So on this, if I gave you a box with a magic button and said you could press this button and all of those people would die, you're saying right now there's a fair chance that you're gonna poop.
Do I have to accept cookies before I get a chance to press this thing?
And there's a conundrum, isn't it? If it's an app on a website, it's a virtual. It's a button on a React page.
Yeah,
damn it!
Exactly. Then I'm going to have to, and I'm going to end up in the advanced settings trying to figure out what's a marketing cookie when it's at home.
And you assume it's been done right.
Well, that's it. It's definitely not. They're just like, put the cookie box on.
The amount of times, if you look at those advanced settings just on that particular gripe, you find that actually the scan failed. And even though it uses cookies and you can see them in your dev screen, they're not there on the banner. Yeah. So look out for that one. That's cool. So I like that. You want to kill all the cookie folks.
Yeah, if it's all right.
You will be the cookie monster. Yeah, literally.
They've created a cookie monster with that thing. The intentions were good, but look at this hell that we're now in.
think misplaced intentions. Maybe just somebody's making money out of it, and that's it. We've now got to keep the cookie industry alive, and that's a terrifying thought. Actually, who would be out of jobs if the cookie stuff died off?
Exactly.
Ugh. Bill, have you got any amazing gripes to share? Feel free. We can always edit this out, and
gripes. No, man, I'm a happy-go-lucky guy. I have no gripes at all.
So does this need to be like a 9 p.m. watershed gripe moment then? Come on, there's got to be something that you go, damn it.
This is where he ends his career.
I don't know, man. Honestly, I've got no gripes, no problems, no issues. Nothing. Life is good.
Oh, that's good, isn't it?
Wow. I kind of want to say I don't believe you, but I kind of half know you-ish, so I could probably go with that.
I don't put myself in too many situations where... Now, I mean, I have an 11-year-old who likes this show called Dance Moms, which has got to be the most toxic TV show ever produced. And
Dance Moms.
I love that show.
I have to watch like 2 or 3 hours a day right now just to, share time with the 11-year-old.
Oh.
So if I have to gripe, I have to. Maybe that's the level.
Yeah.
You watch Dance Moms? No, you don't. You watch that show? Oh my God, dude.
Oh yeah.
Don't watch it.
I don't watch TV. That's the other thing. It's how I got talking to that lady. She was like, I'm like a TV chef. I'm like,
well, she mentioned that
I don't
first.
watch TV. No, she was really nice, and I mean really, really nice. And then it just got to the point where she was like traveling and doing all this stuff, and it kind of came up. She was really like humble about it.
I thought she was like
but
chopping.
Other people were looking at her.
I thought she was like chopping on the table.
On the
fast
train?
Chef chopping.
I love that.
And then you're like, oh, are you a chef? And she's like, what, this? Yeah, big time. I'm on telly.
Well, she was wearing an amazing like outfit that actually was just covered in crap. So I kind of like put two and two together that she'd been doing a thing in cooking. But no, she was super nice about the whole thing. Nice. But yeah, like people were looking on the train. I'm like, I don't know what's going on. She's like, oh, I'm kind of like famous. I'm like,
I'm kind of famous. Yeah, it just says that. Cool.
Yeah, it's like you clearly haven't seen me
that's
around.
Amazing.
You really don't watch TV? I need TV to decompress at the end of the day.
So I walk the dog. I go on some long walks. I've got a motorbike, and I fell off that last year, about ripped my own leg off, which was entertaining.
Ouch.
Yeah, I'm an idiot. And then what we do is I watch old stuff. So I'll actually sit downstairs coding at night with, this is a bit of a thing. I'll put Terminator 2 on almost on every other night and just leave it on in the background.
Great.
And it's like my family that I never had.
You don't watch the news and get an hour of like what's happening around the planet?
Nah, I follow the financial news, so I'll kind of glaze over the Financial Times, The Economist. I'll look at some where money's moving to get an idea of what's actually going on. But the problem was I spent some time in the security industry, and I realised that what the right hand does is not what the left hand does. So I kind of thought, well, this is nonsense, and I just tuned out. So I tend to not get involved. I'm interested in what goes on in tech, but mainstream mob news cannot be doing with it.
I like the idea that the cast of Terminator 2 are now your family, though. That feels like your family.
Yeah.
Like,
I feel really
you're
close.
worried about John
bizarre,
Connor
right?
throughout. Like, trying to get work done, and you're like, oh, I hope John's okay.
Well, John Connor's kind of like Schrodinger's cat, isn't he? He's kind of both dead and alive.
Yeah, because of the time travel.
Depending on what timeline. Yeah, like, so you kind of think, well, it's kind of like I'm on the line about the whole thing. I mean, you kind of think if it wasn't for John Connor, that, Skynet would have an easier time of it, and being in systems engineering, I've spent my life wiring systems together, so I kind of feel not sorry for the systems. Maybe I've got some empathy for what it's trying to do. Maybe that's just strange.
Yeah.
And I kind of, you kind of hope that, I don't know, the machines kind of go, hey, you help me to communicate and grow and learn. Yeah. And I don't think that's ever going to happen. I think we're screwed.
I don't think you see
Terminator 2 is my advice.
I don't think you see many kids take away and they watch that film and they're on the side of the Terminator. That's quite an interesting.
Yeah, but have you ever seen the point in Star Wars where is it Mace Windu and you've got the Emperor, and actually the kind of reasoning for the dark side, and they're, and I'm kind of at one point I'm like, I don't know what to do at this point. It's a little bit convincing.
Yeah, I think that's
like, where's truth?
Yeah.
And you're like,
that's the thing about the dark side. It is tempting. That's why it's
it is.
Schrodinger's John Connor's side, the dark side. Anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I've got a gripe. I'll share one because I know Bill's being cagey. I think he's got more gripes. He's just not sharing. But governments interfering with stuff they don't understand, like everything going on right now with this. Is it Cyber Resilience Act? Have you seen this with the EU stuff?
And the cookies was this, wasn't it?
Well, the Cookie Monster, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so between the CRA, which I can only think of like, React single page apps and all that stuff when I do that. So it's the wrong acronym for my brain. But yeah, watching governments interfere in things, I'm like, what are you doing?
It's a double-edged sword, right? Because I think we've learned lessons that if the government waits too long to set policy, it becomes too late to set policy. We saw it with crypto. And I think what's happening is governments are trying to get ahead of the whole AI thing so it doesn't turn into another crypto thing. And so if I had to make a choice, I'd rather the governments come in and build some really strong laws that are easier to let open, because it's like anything in moderation. If it's open, you can't close it. If it's closed, you can open it. And so I would love to have enough experts to come in to keep something super closed right now. And then as we learn more, open it. But if they don't do it now, we're going to have crypto part 2.
It's the get the experts in bit, isn't it? That like when they do that, they have the kind of consultant area at this time, and then it seems to be just politicians then making decisions which they don't really have a business making. Cookies is a great example of this. Great intentions. They tried to stop us being tracked. Now we are tracked and we have to accept it explicitly. You know what I mean? And if you reject the cookie, by the way, it then can't remember that you've rejected it, so it has to ask you again next time. Like they've got us over a barrel.
Okay,
you just made me hate this even more now. Thanks for that, Matt.
Yeah, but you wouldn't say that GDPR helped solve some of that, where somebody can say, get rid of all my stuff. I get it on the Slack, by the way. Once a week, somebody says, delete my account. And Slack finally gave me the ability to do it without needing them to do it. Right. And I just had somebody on Ardan say, get this unsubscribe link doesn't work. And I told my team this week, there are laws. And they may not be in the US yet, but we have a fundamental ethical responsibility to comply with somebody who wants this stuff gone. So maybe it's a charade, but I mean, doesn't that help solve some of that problem by just somebody being able to say, get rid of it at some level?
Yeah, exactly. I think that's it. Like there's a good side and a dark side to this. It sounds like, David, you're again on the dark side, coming down on the dark side.
There's something very unnerving about my just whole being. I think, I don't know, karma is, I'm with Bill. I believe in karma, but I think...
It's getting you bad.
Past lives, maybe. I think I was something bad. Yeah, seriously. I've got a verge to like kind of hedge on the wrong
maybe
stuff.
Just a baddie.
Like, I mean, maybe I'm just I'm a fun-loving, smiley baddie.
Exactly. You're like a
But when did we forget that when you're online, you're basically opened up publicly to everything? Like, when did we stop or pretend that wasn't the case?
Yeah, this is a whole other podcast. This is literally like a 9 p.m. show. I think like the whole mob mentality of having you programmed to believe something is a way it isn't is the best genius move that a lot of these, mobsters or puppeteers have pulled off. It's just incredible. Yeah. I mean, the whole, my big one at the moment is this Cyber Resilience Act, where companies that deliver open source could be financially responsible for companies that use it, and then you've got to cover, indemnities and all this stuff. I think, wow, it's like, and from a Europe point of view, I mean, I was Googling for this yesterday. Is the UK going to be affected by the Cyber Resilience Act? And it's like, well, we're not in Europe anymore. We're on the fringe of it. But obviously, trading with Europe is going to affect us. Of course, it's going to affect us. It's like, how do we prepare for that? And how do we prepare the industry for it? Because it could see a lot of open source projects go, nah, I'm out. I mean, you imagine, was it the curl project, and Amazon gave them a whopping $5,000. And it's like, then, and Amazon saying, hang on a minute. If we're doing business in Europe, lol, you're now covering all of our uses for it. And go, nah, actually, I'm done. It's cool, it's yours, I'm out.
Right.
That potentially can happen across some really well-known projects, because it's like, well, we do this from the love of our hearts, we're a bunch of nerds, whatever.
Yeah.
Well, that could happen to me with service. People are using it and doing what they want with it, right? But whatever. I mean, there's always going to be, lack for a better word. My dad said this to me when I was young, and it's absolutely true. He said, there's always one asshole in your life at any given time. They just exist, and they're there, and they're busting your chops, and you just got to learn how to deal with it. It's not that you won't have two, but you'll have at least one at every given moment of your life. And I just think it's the same, right? People ruin it for everyone.
But how can you exercise karma without the assholes?
Yeah.
Without assholes, you can't have love and light, man.
If you don't have the really large lows, you can't have the really big highs, right? You don't want to live in your room every day and not enjoy life. That's how it works. So if you want these highs, you got to hit some pretty bad lows.
And I think this is where my personality is wide. If I can be the dark, I can show you the light.
There you go.
There you go. I've just sold myself to the dark side, haven't I?
Yeah.
There we go.
You've sold yourself and us to you joining the dark side.
Well, I hope you can join me on my journey.
I'll certainly keep listening to the podcast.
Episode 8 is probably going to be next year now, unless you guys come back. I'm only joking. Hopefully not, actually. I kind of, I don't know. Life took a bit of a mad turn last year, but
It sounds like you took a bit of a mad turn as well with your motorbike.
Well, I changed. Oh, yeah. You know, I wish I could say I was doing something stupid, but I wasn't. I literally went round a bend at 10 miles an hour, and the bike just went... and I was underneath the bike, so the bike came down on my leg. I'm like, oh. The worst thing was, my wife was behind me in the car. So she hates the motorbike, like hates it. So I got off the floor and 2 cars nearly drove into me. So I'm like, oh, that was close. Nearly got squashed. So I managed to get up and put the bike on its wheels. And then I could see my wife going like, what the hell? Because I basically hit the floor and went, oh, beep. And there was a swear word. I'm not going to edit it, but yeah. So I said some swear words at night.
Fair enough. At night, you wouldn't have.
And then I went to get on the motorbike. I think the problem is it carries at night, doesn't it? And everybody's got the windows open so that it goes into everybody's house. Just set the scene. It was dark, it was damp, it was wet. A British northern evening, You're from
at least you
get it.
You got a bike, because in my first marriage, my wife wouldn't let me get a bike.
Oh.
No way.
And then when I got divorced, I didn't get the bike. And now I'm married again, and I'm not allowed to have a bike.
She already have a bike?
My brain goes, I had this window of opportunity, and I didn't take it.
I knew there was a gripe. We've got one. He wants a bike. There's a go. We've got one. I'm just going to finish a bike story off because this is interesting. Ready? I tried to get back on the bike and my leg wouldn't work. So I literally I was like, right, I'll ride away. And then went to lift my leg. I'm like I've got a foreign component attached to my body. My foot was planted and I apparently ripped the ligaments on my ass cheek, side of my leg, chipped my hip. And and it took me 4 months to get working. The worst thing was, I didn't go to A&E that night. I went the next day. So I lay in bed going, I need a wee. I need to get up and go and have a wee. And I crawled on the floor, managed to hoik myself up onto the toilet, and then almost passed out on the way back. So my wife the next day went to Argos, bought me some crutches, and took myself to A&E. And the queue was horrendous for hospital. I fell over in the waiting room, and then they took pity on me and put me on a bed. That's the first time I've been in hospital as well. So yeah, get a bike, Bill. They're great.
No, it's too late.
The drugs were brilliant.
It's over.
Oh, you don't know what you're missing out on. When you're over here next, I'll come down on it. You can have a ride.
Yay. Yeah, I guess I'm not in the country, so the rules don't apply.
There you go. We'll have a word with your fair lady, see if we can get you a bike. What kind of bike would you have if you could have one?
I want one of those Indian as a starter bike.
Okay, like a BSA or something.
Yeah, it's something not super expensive, but well designed and put together. And then if things really progress, then maybe I can look at a Harley. But I wouldn't buy a Harley day one because that's ridiculous.
I'm going to upset people. I'm going to upset people here. The Harleys are rickety, really rickety. You want something either Japanese or something well trodden.
Have you seen those Indian bikes? They look beautiful, man. I've heard good things about them.
Yeah, and they love them as well in India. The whole ceremony of getting a new motorbike is pretty cool.
Is it?
Yeah, you're not seeing the shows and stuff where they go and buy one and they give them flowers and these prayers and stuff. And
you don't watch telly. Where are you seeing all this?
I know. What the heck?
So right, you caught me there. Busted. But my defence is I stopped watching TV about a year ago. So it was way before. Yeah, it was like beginning of COVID or something. As soon as I could get out in life again, I'm like, yeah, I'm out. Yeah. The news just sucks at that point. But yeah, this is a while ago. But yeah, I watched this whole documentary about guy got a new bike and you got flower garlands and there was incense swinging and all stuff.
Sounds
it was crazy.
Amazing. By the way, is there a dog here, or was that you? Wasn't you, Bill, just ruffling your chops? Oh,
where is he? This dog loves sitting with me all the time, so he's now here. He's attached to my. If I sit on the couch, he just puts his head on my lap, and that's it.
Does he sulk when you're not there?
Doesn't know.
I don't know, but the moment I walk in, he's usually with me. So
Yeah.
he just sat down.
Yeah. My beagle's downstairs. You probably heard it on the mic. I think he was my boy got dropped off about half an hour ago, and I could hear the dog downstairs doing his beagle, nose in the air, trumpeting and howling and stuff. Else he'd be with me actually, just down to the left on the floor, which makes some of the calls interesting because a beagle howl is like it makes your eyeballs shake and your teeth bleed. So I can compare it with it hurts. Anyway, cool. So we're out of gripes. We've got one from Bill, which is great. I'll leave that in the recording. He wants
Nice. Got a gripe.
Yeah, we got a gripe. And he couldn't get one. His wife wouldn't let him have one. I love that.
My wives won't let me have one, yeah. It's okay. I rather have Allie than the bike, so that's a good thing.